Hello, everybody. Hello, Heather.
Hello, here we are again.
Yeah, here we are again, session 4. So what's that, a third of the way through?
Yes, about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And here they all come.
Yeah.
That's great. They seem to be back for more. Ralph, Bob, Kelly, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't think we've got anyone from the middle of the night.
No, that would be dedication.
That would be, seriously.
Yeah.
Erin, good to see you again. I hope you're enjoying LiveCode.
As always, we'll just give everybody a couple of minutes to join before we get started properly.
Yep. Oh, there's Andrew Bell. And Brian and Steve from Allegheny County, Virginia. There you go. And Peter from Loughborough. So, Marcus, good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all back again for more LiveCode. Just as always, I'll be mostly presenting, but Heather will be there keeping an eye on your questions. So if you do have any questions during the session, just pop them in the chat and Heather will keep an eye on them and interrupt me as required.
Yep. As necessary. We'll be having our little coffee break in the middle as usual, so hopefully some of you can join me then.
Yes, I'll put up a slide with the URL for it. Have we got a button this time, Heather?
We do have a button.
We do have a button.
I have buttoned this up, so there will be a button for you to press to join the Zoom. Bernd and Mark. Those are very familiar LiveCode names, are they not?
They're stalwarts of the LiveCode crew.
But Eleanor can still show you a trick or two.
Well, I hope so. What's quite interesting is sometimes I learn things as well. There's so many ways to do things and so many tricks and just so many things that you can do that even after all these years, I still get surprised by little sneaky ways to do things. So, yeah. So in this session, we'll be having a bit of a look at our UI. We've got a very simple UI just now, and we'll be sort of extending that and doing some things in different ways. So that is our plan for today. And I guess it's probably time to get started. Nobody's joined for a while, so
yeah, I think we could dive in.
Yeah. So as I say, Heather will be there. So do pop any questions in the chat, and we can address them as we go through. But for now, I'll turn on slides for the moment. Yeah, so this is session 4, and we'll be looking at the UI. So at the moment, we've only really had a look at our UI on the desktop. So I'll actually be deploying it to the iOS simulator just so we can have a look at how it looks there. We'll be updating our controls, our colors, our layout to make it a bit more user-friendly, a bit more polished. We'll be adding some native mobile controls to improve the experience on a mobile device. Now, I'll just be showing it on the iOS simulator because that runs quite well on my machine. But I think that everything we're doing will be equally applicable to Android. I don't think there's anything we're doing that is only for iOS or only for Android. I think the things that we'll be doing are mostly cross mobile platform, if you like, but I'll just be using the iOS simulator because it's easier to show you from here. So we'll do that. We'll add some native mobile controls. Then what we'll do is we'll update the UI so it actually uses buttons for entry instead of typing into a field. That's a bit more natural particularly on a mobile device. But we'll make it so that even once we change the UI, because we'll be mostly sticking with just a single UI, we're not going to try and change too much in between platforms, but we'll make it so that even though it's buttons, if you are on a desktop platform, you can still use the keyboard to type. so you don't have to be clicking on buttons. And we'll be looking at some other new UI elements that we'll be adding to our stack just to make it look a bit nicer. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. So let me just get that set up. And I will move you guys out of the way so that we don't get the eternal list there.
Helena, is your video off?
Is my video off? Yes. I don't know when that happened because it was on. Or maybe when I switched to slide. So yes, it should be on again now. Okay, so let's get started. I will start up LiveCode and we'll be starting with our stack from last session, which if you don't have it, you can download it from the session 3 resources, which are available via your account. So let's open it up. So this is where we'd got to at the end of session 3, and we'll just be extending from here. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to deploy it to the iOS simulator and see how it looks, and from there we can decide what we want to do. So I've already got the iOS simulator running here. So if anybody hasn't done iOS development yet, there is quite a bit of setup involved in getting iOS testing set up, and we won't be addressing that directly here today, but we do have some lessons on that. But for today, we're just going to be really using this as a way to see what our app looks like. But as I say, I can add links to those resources if anybody needs them. Okay, so to get started, to test on iOS, what we need to do is we need to set up our standalone application settings just to point to the platforms that we're interested in. So I open up the standalone application settings from the file menu. By default, the 3 desktop platforms will be selected. If you want to build any others, we have to go in and select them. So we'll go to iOS, we'll tick iOS, and everything will become enabled there. And the only thing I'm actually going to change here just now is I'm going to give this a unique internal app ID. And the reason that I do this is because this is the sort of the unique identifier on the device. You can see my simulator here has a bunch of test stacks on it. So if you leave this as the sort of the default one, it'll just, whatever stack you're working on, it'll replace the one with the same internal app ID. So it's always a good idea to change it. And even when you're testing later on, when you're actually building your standalone, getting it ready to make available, to put it in the App Store, then it's important that it's unique. But for now, it just means that it won't replace any of the ones that are already here. It'll just have its own app ID. So we'll go for LiveCode.anagram. That's the only thing we need to change at the moment. So we just tick iOS and change the internal app ID. If we were doing Android, we would do the same. We would tick the build platforms here, we change the identifier, and we would just work from there. Okay, so that's set up, so I can just close that now. Now, in the development menu, you'll see that I have a list of test targets, and these are the test targets that are available for the platforms that I have selected in the standalone application settings. So you see I've got iPhone, that's because my actual phone is plugged in, the iPad simulator, the iPhone simulator. I also have an Android phone plugged in, but because I haven't selected Android, it's not currently available here. So make sure we've got the iPhone simulator selected, and then we can either click the test button here in the development menu, or we can use the test button here to deploy it to the simulator. So I'll click the button here. I will save that and we'll see what it looks like. And hopefully this won't take too long, even though it's quite a simple stack. But of course I'm running the webinar software as well, so it might be a little slower than usual. Okay, so immediately we can see there are some issues here. There's some overlap. It's not using all the space. The background is a grey color. So there's quite a lot of things that we would want to do here to make this a bit better on iOS. So I'll just hide that for now, and we will get started with making some changes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the full screen mode. So the full screen mode is a way of telling the stack how to scale itself. And it's just setting a property to the type of scaling that you want to use, and then you don't have to worry about writing code to lay anything out. It'll just take your stack and its layout and it'll scale it in the way you choose. So what we want to do is we want to do that on pre-open stack. So we do that when the stack is opened. So I'll open up the stack script. And we already have a pre-open stack handler here, so we're just going to add to it. So leave the things that we're already doing. So we're loading in our dictionary, we're starting the game. And what we'll do here is we'll set the full screen mode of this stack to letter, and I'm going to use letterbox. So there's a few options. Letterbox will put black bars at the top and the bottom, or the left and the right, to maintain the aspect ratio. So it'll use as much space as it can, but it'll maintain the aspect ratio of your stack. So that's quite a nice one because it does, it means that nothing scales sort of out of like aspect, so nothing looks stretched out or squashed. It looks right, and it'll use as much space as it can. There are a few options, so if you want to see what the other ones are, you can just look it up in the dictionary and we'll have a look at full screen mode. So there is, let's see here, we've got empty, which means do nothing, which is effectively, we haven't set it, so that's effectively the same as not setting it, so that's what we saw before. Then there's exact fit, which will use the whole screen, but it does stretch, so if the aspect ratio is not the same, then things might look stretched or squashed. Letterbox is the one that we're using, and then there's no border and no scale. Are there any others? And then there's show all. So you can have a look in the dictionary and see which one you think will suit your app the best. And that's all you need it to do to get it scaling. Of course, later on, you might want to write code to resize the stack yourself, but this is often all you need. It's just to set the full screen mode. And it works because stacks, when they're deployed to a mobile device, they're always full screen. So as soon as you deploy it, the stack becomes a full screen stack on the device, and the full screen sort of scaling mode will be used. So again, let's just see how much of a difference that made for us. We've already got everything set up. We've still got our test target selected, so we can just click the test button again. Okay, so it's already using the space better. There's still quite a lot of space at the top and the bottom, and that's just to do with the aspect ratio of our stack, so we can change that. So that is what we will look at next. So when we created our stack, I think we used the iPhone 4 default size, the 320 by 480. So instead I'm going to use the iPhone 5. So I'm just going to change the height of my stack and relay things out a bit just to use the space a bit better. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we're in edit mode. We'll open up the stack inspector from the object menu. We'll go to the size and position, and we'll just change this to 568. That is an aspect ratio that's used on, well, certainly a lot of the iPhones, and probably some of the Android phones as well. But the beauty of the full screen mode and using Letterbox is whatever size the device is, there's so many different screen sizes and aspect ratios now that using Letterbox or one of the other ones that maintains your aspect ratio scales, it'll always look okay. All right, so that should look a bit better. The other thing that we noticed, oh, and let's not forget about our second card. So I just moved these buttons and resized the field here. But if we go to our all words card, then we want to do the same. So I'm just using the arrow keys to move that button, and I'll select the field and stretch it a bit taller, so we're using more of the space. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we'll give it a white background, which will look a bit nicer than that sort of default grey colour that it was. And the way that we'll do that is, again, we'll set it on the stack, because if we set it on the stack, then the background colour of the stack will be inherited by all our cards. If we wanted our cards to have different background colours, we could set them on the cards themselves, but we want all our cards to have a white background, so we'll stay on the stack property inspector. We'll go to the colours, and the one that we want to change is the background colour. So the one here with the sort of score through, that gives us a colour picker. And I've got white here in my sort of palette, but you could set it with the RGB, or you could do it from here. You can choose whichever one you prefer. I've got white selected there. Now we can't see the change here, but that's because the default background colour of a stack on Mac is white. So now when we deploy it, we should see that it is white on the iOS simulator. So again, let's just have a quick check and see how it looks. Okay, so it's now white, which I think looks a bit better. But there's a few other things we might want to change. We can see the text doesn't fit quite perfectly in here. It looks like the default size of the text is a bit bigger on iOS than it is on the desktop. These buttons here, because they've got 3D set on them, don't look great here, and our scroll bar is quite sort of blocky, not very, and that's not an iOS looking scroll bar. So we will address all those things. So we'll start with our fields, and for these ones we'll simply just make them a bit taller. There's different ways that you can handle things like this. You could add code to set the text size of the stack when you're on mobile to something smaller than we're using here. So if I go back to our stack inspector, you'll see that we just have our stack size, our text size set to the default there. So we could change that here. We could make that smaller, which would make it smaller on all the platforms. Or alternatively, we could add some code in pre-open-stack and say, if the platform's iOS, then set the text size to 11, otherwise set it to 13. But I think what we'll do is we'll just make our fields a little bit taller. So if I open up one of these, I can see that they're 21 tall. So I'm just going to make all the fields here a little bit taller. We've also got our progress field there, so don't forget about that one. I'm going to make them all 26. And then I'll just use my mouse to nudge things around a bit. We've got a bit more space for them. Move this one down. And let's not forget about our second card either. There's just one on here. Oh, looks like I clicked something by accident there. So again, we'll set this to 26 and then just nudge it down a little bit. So this still looks all right on desktop, and hopefully it will look a bit better on iOS as well. Now I also noticed that this field here, let's turn off our focus borders, because those on iOS they don't look great. It's not a very iOS-y thing, and actually this is the only field that we'll be typing into, and in a second we'll be changing that over to a native text input anyway. So let's turn it off for all of these. It's already off on this one, and the same on our second card. Let's just make sure our focus border is off for both of these. And we also saw that our buttons look a bit blocky, and that's because of the 3D property. So we'll turn off the 3D property for our buttons. So we can do it one at a time. I can select a button, turn off 3D. You'll then see that the border looks a bit blockier, so we'll turn our border width down to 1. But we can also multi-select and do it with multiple controls at the same time. So again, we'll turn off 3D and I'll set the border width to 1. So now they just look like plain square buttons. And again, let's not forget this card, which will look a bit better on iOS. So again, let's save that. And all we have to do is click our test button, because everything's still set up, and we'll have a look at what it looks like now. Okay, so that looks a bit better. The square buttons the text fits on there better. We've still got the blocky scroll bars, but we will be dealing with those in a second. Okay, so it's looking a bit better, but what we're going to do now is we're going to add some native mobile controls. So the ones that we're going to look at are, if we click here, you'll see that a LiveCode field does work reasonably well on mobile. So I can type into it, or I can type into it here. And actually it should work if I can think of a word from there. What's a word? Oh, can't see one. Let's do another option. Fun. Okay, that's a word. I can click enter and it will recognize the word. So it does work reasonably well, but it's missing some of the nice features that you get with a native field, like the cut, copy and paste, the ability to use the little selection, like draggable selection handlers, etc. So even though this is quite a simple field, we'll look at that just so that we can learn how to do it. And we'll also be we'll be turning off these scroll bars and using a native scroller as well. So that's the two native controls we'll be looking at. There are some other ones, but those are the ones that we'll use here. So we'll start with our answer field. And what we're going to do is on mobile, we're going to hide the answer field and we're going to use a native control. So let's get started writing some code for that. Just double check, don't think there's been any questions so far. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll open up our card script. And what we'll do is when the card is opened, we will create our native controls. So what we'll do is we'll add a pre-open card handler here. So it's on pre-open card. And the first thing we want to do is we only want to create these mobile controls when we're on mobile. They don't work on desktop. You actually can't even create them on desktop. It'll throw an error. So the first thing we want to do is check if we are on mobile. And we can do that by checking the environment function. So we can say if the environment is mobile, then do this. Otherwise, do that. So the environment will return true if we're on iOS or Android. If you need to know whether you're on iOS or Android, then you can check the platform and it'll tell you. But the environment will give us development, standalone, mobile, etc. So here we just need to check the environment. That's all we need because this is this will work on iOS and Android. And what we do is we have to create this mobile control in code. So we will be creating an input control. So we use the command mobile control create. And then we specify the name of our control, and we're going to call it answer entry. And then we give it the control type, which is input. And I'm just going to double check that I have got those the right way around. Nope, it's the other way around. I correctly dited myself. First comes the type of control and then the name of the control. And the ones that you can create here, you can do an input control, you can do a scroller, you can do a player, you can do a multi-line input control. Is that all of them? Let's have a look. So we'll just look up mobile control create here. Control type is, and the browser. I thought there was 5. So there's the browser, scroller, player, input, which is a single line text input, and multi-line, which is a multi-line text control. So those are the ones we can create this way. So that will create us a control, an input control named answer entry. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to set some of the properties of that control. So it's mobile control set, and then we specify the name of our control and the property that we want to set. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it is visible. So we'll set visible to true. Next, we're going to tell it what space we want to take up. We give it a rect, And in this case, we want it to use the same rect as the LiveCode field that's here. So here we can just pass the rect of field answer. And you could also, you could specify the actual rect, you could give it the numbers, but in this case, that's exactly the space that we want it to use. So I'm just resizing this so I get my scroll bar there. So it's now visible, it's got a rect. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a border. So mobile control set. And we want to set the border style of it to line. And then finally, we're going to set the font size. And we'll set it to 13. Font size. And we will set that to 13. And you can, each of the different types of native controls has a different set of properties associated with it, and you can find all those in the dictionary. So we're on mobile, we've created our answer entry. What we want to do is we want to hide the field, because as we saw, the LiveCode field does kind of work on mobile, and we've placed our input control directly over the fields. What we don't want is to have those two sort of input controls right on top of each other. So while we're on mobile, we will hide the actual answer field. But we also want to make sure that that field is visible when we're on desktop. So when we're not on mobile, then we'll show the answer field. We'll apply that, no errors. So the other thing we need to be careful of is the way that all the mobile control, all the native controls work is that they actually sort of float above all the other controls on your stack. So they don't belong to they belong to the stack itself, but they don't belong to a card, for example. So what you have to do is you have to be careful to delete the mobile controls when you leave a card. Otherwise, the mobile control will remain in the same place, even though there's a different card underneath it. So if you're creating mobile controls, you always want to delete them when you leave a card. So that will handle the close card message. Again, we want to check if we are on mobile. Otherwise, we'll get an error. So if the environment is mobile, then, and all we want to do is mobile control delete, and then we just give it the name of our control answer entry. Okay, apply that. Looks okay. Save this, and we'll test it on the iOS simulator because we can't test it on desktop, not the mobile controls. So let me bring the simulator up again and we will test it. Okay, so here is our field. Doesn't look that different, but if I sort of click here, you'll see that I now have that blue cursor. And what I can do is if I hold down, I should get, yeah, so I can select, cut, copy, paste. So we've got all those native iOS options for the text input, and it works on Android as well. That's cross mobile platforms. So it gives us all these options that you're used to with text entry on your mobile device. Okay, so that is, and just so that so I can try and explain what would happen. Now, if we didn't delete this control here, when we move to the other card, it would still sort of be here, even though we're on a different card. So that's why we have to be careful and delete them on close card. All right, so now we're going to deal with this scroll bar here and how it looks on the mobile device. So it's the native one, the one that's part of the field, looks a bit blocky. It's not a native scroller, can't use your finger to scroll it. So instead we will, again, we'll create one using mobile control create. So we'll make sure we've got our card script open. And we'll go back to pre-open card. And after we've done everything we need to do for our answer field, we will now create our scroller. So it's the same idea, mobile control create. This time we are creating a scroller. And we'll give it a name. Let me check what I've called it before, so I don't confuse myself. Okay, so our mobile controller, we're going to call it Found Words Scroller. So Found Words Scroller. And again, we want to set some properties on it. So mobile control set, this time with Found Words Scroller. And again, we want to make it visible. Or our visible will be set to true. We want to give it a rect. Again, we can use the rect. We can use the rect of this found words field here. So we set the rect to the rect of field found words. Now, for a scroller, what we need to do is we also need to specify the content rect, which is the actual the contents of the field or the contents of the group or whatever it is that you're scrolling over. So the rect is the sort of visible space that it takes up. So it's the rect of the field. And then the content rect is the rect of the actual complete content that's in there that you're scrolling. So the rect is the sort of, you can imagine it as the window over the full content, but we need to tell it how much content there is so it knows how to scroll. So as well as the rect, we also want to set the content rect. And again, we'll give it a rect, but this time we can refer to it just from the 00 points. It doesn't have to be relative to the actual field that we're scrolling over. So
you have a spelling error.
I do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Content.
Ah, thank you. That would have caused all sorts of problems. Thank you, Heather. Yeah. Content rect. So we can specify the top left as 00, and then we can make it the formatted width of the field, which usually will be the same as the field unless we've got, well, we shouldn't have anything long because we only allow 7-letter words at the moment. So the formatted width, but then the formatted height is the imported one. So we need to use the formatted height to get the height of the content of the field as opposed to the height of the field object. If anybody hasn't encountered the formatted height before, so here, let's have a look at this. So the height of this field is 322. That's the height of this actual control. But if you had lots of text in there, the formatted height would give you the height of the contents of the field. And then comparing the height of the field to the height of the contents, that's how we work out how to scroll. So in this case, so we'll start at 00 to the formatted width of the field, and then the formatted height of the field. So that's our content rect. And I have got a closed bracket there. So it's visible, it's got a rect, it's got a content rect. The other thing we need to do is we need to tell it to show a vertical indicator. Now we're only going to use the vertical indicator because we don't think that this field will do any horizontal scrolling. So it's the indicator, and we'll set that to true. We should now have a scroller with a rect, so with an area, with a content rect, so with some contents to scroll over, and a vertical indicator. And because we've created our scroller, our mobile scroller, what we'll do is we'll turn off the V scroll bar of our field here. So we will also set the V scroll bar of field found words to false. And similarly to our answer field, when we are on the desktop, we do want that to be turned on. So when we're not on mobile, we want to set the V scroll bar of field found words to true. Oh, somebody getting the occasional bit of crackling in the audio. I don't know if it's because I think it's because it might just be some of my wires affecting the microphone. Let me see if I can rearrange them a bit. Maybe if I do this, it'll work better. Right. try that. And if I can have a look in the break as well and see if I can rearrange my mic setup a bit. Okay, so we've created our scroll bar. There's one thing we still need to do, which is to actually make the scroll bar work. So what we'll do is we'll just come down to the end of our script here. So we're still in the card script. And what happens is the mobile scroller, when you scroll it, it will send you a message, scroller did scroll. And when we receive that, then we have to sort of manually update the UI. So when you create the scroller and you give it a rect and you give it a content rect, it then sort of, as before, it sits on top of all the controls. So the scroller is not really linked to the field. We've just told it that it takes up the same area. So it tells us when it's scrolled and how much it's scrolled, and we have to update the field with that amount to make it appear that it's scrolling, because the scroll bar that we've created is not actually linked in any way to the field. So we need to do a bit more work. So what we do is, so I'm just gonna, I'll get it from the dictionary just so that we get all the correct parameters, etc. So it's scroller did scroll. Just copy this, and you'll see that actually there's a few messages that the scroller sends. So there's begin drag and decelerate, scroll to top, etc. But for the moment, we're only going to use scroller did scroll. So we will say on scroller did scroll. What we want to do is we want to set the vscroll of field found words to pv scroll, which is the parameter passed in here, and that comes from the mobile scroller. So the scroller lets us know how much it's been scrolled by, and we update our field to match that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to implement a very similar thing on our other card, because we'll probably be able to see it a bit better on here, because here we actually have a list of words. And we'll do it what could be, I'm going to call it the efficient way. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and then we're on our second card. So we will open up the card script here. You'll see that we're on card all words. And again, we want to do this all in pre-open card. So actually, I should have copied the whole pre-open card here. Now, we don't need this input field. Don't need this either. And our field has a different name. So this field is all words. So instead here, what we'll do is we'll mobile control create scroller, all words scroller. We want it to be visible. We want the rect to be the rect of field all words. And similarly, we want our content rect to be 0, 0, the formatted with the field all words. And then the formatted height of field all words. And then we want our V indicator to be true. We'll set the V scroll bar of field all words to false. And when we're on desktop, we'll set it to true. And then we also need our scroller did scroll handler. So again, I'll just copy that. When we receive scroller did scroll, in this case, we'll set the V scroll of field all words V scroll. And the reason that this works this way is because I've only got one scroller on this card. If we had multiple scrollers, what you can do is you can use the mobile control target to tell you the name of the control that sent the scroller did scroll message, and then you can scroll the relevant control or bit of your screen. So we've only got one scroller, so I haven't put that check in. But if you had multiple scrollers for different parts of your screen, you would use mobile control target and then check which one the message came from, and then scroll the right thing. Okay, so let's close this. We've applied all our scripts. We will save our stack. I'll go back to card 1 and let's test it and see, hopefully, it'll work. Okay, so you can see our scroll bar is not there. We can't see anything here at the moment because there's nothing in there. But if we go to our all words card and we scroll it, so you'll see that now we have a nice iOS scroller, and our field scrolls as I'm sort of clicking and dragging, so scrolling the content. So that is our mobile scroller. Okay, so let's just check if we've got any questions. We've got about 10 minutes before the break. Doesn't look like we've got any questions at the moment, so let's just carry on. Okay, so that as well as adding our sort of iOS text entry, we don't have to worry too much about the scroller, because the scroller, that's all we really do, but we do some things with what's entered into the field here. So what we need to do is we need to update our code so that on mobile, it looks at the text input control rather than the field. So what we'll do is we'll find the places in our card where we actually use that field, and we'll update them so that they use the native input control. So let's have a look. So in check word, so when we click on enter here, in check word, we always have a look at what the user has typed in, and we check to see if it's a valid word. So right here, we're putting field answer into T-word. On mobile, we're not using the field answer. So instead we have to get the text from the input control. So again, we'll use our if the environment is mobile, then else. When it's not mobile, we will just do exactly what we did before. When it is mobile, instead of putting field answer into T-word, we will use mobile control get. So we put mobile control get, and similarly to mobile control set, we give it the name of our control, which is answer entry, and then the name of the property that we want to get, which in this case is text. Again, these are all listed in the dictionary, and we'll put that into T-word.
There's an interesting comment in the chat there from Kelly.
Yes, very good point. Thank you, Kelly. So despite the fact that I was telling you about how you have to be careful to delete your mobile controls on close card, I forgot to delete my mobile scroller on close card. So we will add that now.
You were just testing to make sure everyone was paying attention.
Exactly. That was a deliberate test. Thank you, Heather. So on this card, we will delete our found words scroller. And then we will go to our all words card, open up the card script, add a close card handler. And we will, in this one, mobile control delete. And it is the all words scroller. Yeah, I bet if I went back here, maybe now would be scrollers where they're, yeah, so there you go. That's what happens. This card now has the all words scroller visible on it. So that's what happens. If you're ever working on mobile and you end up with something like that, like a scroller where you don't expect it, or a text input that if you click on a particular bit of the card, it suddenly appears, it's probably because you haven't deleted your controls and you do end up with exactly this issue here. And the reason that I'm then getting that error was because I'm now, when I'm handling that scroller did scroll message, I'm trying to scroll a field that isn't on this card. So it should, now that we have added the close card, that shouldn't happen again. So we've deleted all words scroller here, and we've deleted our found words scroller here. Thank you, Kelly, for spotting that. Oh, and I think my app has now got into, because I had that error sometimes. Sometimes when you get an error when the debugger pops up when you're working on a mobile device, sometimes gets into a state where it will not run as expected. So let me see if I can resolve that, but I might just have to restart LiveCode. So let's check that's my stack. Or I might be able to do it if I just close the app here. Let me try and remember how to make this a bit smaller. Sure you can, oh, you can just drag it, can't you? That's it. So what I'll do is I'll just delete this here and see if that makes my, oh, yeah, not happy with that. Again, I forgot to check if the environment is mobile. That's the problem. So because I'm calling mobile control delete, but I'm on the desktop, that's that causes an error, which is what was coming, which is what was triggering there. So that should be okay. And I think this one is okay because I already had it in there from when I was deleting the answer entry. Yes. Okay, so let's just check. We can go to all words and we can come back again. Yeah, so Andrew pointed out I had to exit the simulator. It was still in testing. So, okay, so that should be that. Now we've deleted our scrollers. I've checked that I'm on mobile. I think that should be that. So back to where we were before my deliberate test / mistake. We were updating our check word so that when we're on mobile, we get it from the answer entry control instead of field answer. So that's one place. And then we also want to update the answer field when we've entered a word. So at the moment we're clearing the answer field, so we're putting empty into field answer, but we want to do that if the environment is mobile. We want to do that for the text entry. So as before, if we're not on mobile, we just do what we did before, which is put empty into field answer. But here what we want to do is we want to mobile control set, and it's answer entry, and it's text. And we just want to set it to empty. Okay, so let's test that. So we've just updated those two places. I'm not sure if there's anywhere else we need to do it. Do we do anything in new game? Ah, yes. So in new game, we want to do something similar. Into field answer there. Okay, I think that's it. So we will just apply that and we'll do a quick test that that all works okay. Okay, so let's test putting in an answer. Struggling for a word. Just going to start a new one until I can see a word. Meld, that's a word. So we enter it, goes into our field, and we've cleared the answer field there. So we've updated our code where we need to, so that it's now using the native text input wherever it needs to. And let's just check our scrollers. That one is working. And now that I've deleted it, it is no longer on this card. Okay, so that seems like a nice point to pause for the coffee break. I'll show the slide here, but I know that the button is also available. So I'll turn my video off, but I will show the slide.
You should have the button in the chat now if you want to join, and I will just go and get that Zoom session started.
And so the coffee break's 20 minutes, is that right, Heather?
That's
so
correct, Yes.
I will see you all back here in 20 minutes, and we will carry on with our app. So who is it that's in the coffee break with us, or with everyone today? Heather, did you say it's James?
James and Oliver.
James and Oliver.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to, I'll be looping if I don't mute this now. So just do that. Okay.
So it sounded like that was, I don't know if that was people arriving in the coffee break. But yes, have a nice break, and I will see you all in 20 minutes. At the moment, we're always using 7 letters. We can just create our 7 buttons. Later on in the sessions, we might be doing things like adding different levels to our game, at which point maybe we'll add more buttons. But for now, we always use 7 letters, so we're just going to create 7 buttons. So drag out a button, set the name of it to letter 1. So we'll name our buttons letter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but we'll use the label to display the actual letter that we're allowing on it. And this means that our control names, so the way that we refer to them in code, they never change. It's just the label that changes, but when we need it, we can always just get the label property. We don't want to name our buttons A, S, D, because then that would make our code difficult. So we always want the name to be unique and representative, and sort of what we would then do is we would just change the label as we changed our letters. So that's letter 1. Let's see, how big do we want it to be? So we want 7 of them. So let's try 65 by 65. It's maybe a bit big. Well, I can move these down a bit and give us a bit more space. Still a bit big. So let's make it a bit smaller. And we'll go for 55 by 55 and see how that looks. So we've got letter 1. So we want 6 copies of this. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And they will all be the same size. And we'll lay them out like this. These will be our 7 buttons. Make sure that they've all got unique names. So that's letter 1. This will be letter 2. And so on. And letter 7. And what we can do is we can use our property inspector to lay them out. So I can select all the buttons along the top. And if I go to this section, which is align controls, what I can do is I can align them along their top so they all have the same top value. So now they're in a row. And I can also distribute them. Let's go with first to last selected. So that spaces them out evenly, but they're still a bit off to the side. So I'm just going to manually move them across like that. And then similarly, I'll do these three. I will align their tops. I'll distribute them first to last selected, and then we'll just nudge them into place. That looks pretty good. Okay, so those are our 7 buttons. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to group them. So to group controls, what you do is you select all the controls you want. I just did it by dragging because they're close together, but you can use shift click and things to multi-select controls. And then I click the group button here. So now they are in the group. And I'm going to set the name of my group of buttons to letters. That is our letters group. Now, the reason that I have grouped them is because I'm going to put some code on the group rather than in each of the buttons, and that means I only need to write it once rather than writing pretty much the same bit of code for on every button. So I don't have to repeat a piece of code 7 times, I can just put it in one place. Okay, so that's our new layout. Now we need to update our code to take account of the controls that we have deleted and the controls that we have added. So we'll open up our card script. And the first thing we'll do in pre-open card is we will stop creating our input field because we're not using that anymore. We still want our scroller. So what we do is we don't need to show our field there because we're never hiding it now. And then in close card, we no longer need to delete this one because it doesn't exist anymore, but we still want to delete our scroller. So that's the first place. Now we have to look at the places where we use the answer field. And we're now just going back on ourselves and putting code back to how it was, but at least we've seen how to do it. So now to get the entered word, we will always get it from the answer field. And similarly, when we're finished, we will always clear the answer field because we don't have mobile control anymore. And I think new game was the other place that we found that used that. So yes, we'll put empty into field answer. Okay, so that's the 3 places that use the answer field. We'll still be using it in check word because what we'll do is our buttons will sort of type into it rather than using the keyboard. So we need to keep it, but it's there. So now what we want to do is we need to update the code that used to put our letter selection into the letters field. We now want to use our buttons. So in new game, see here what we do is we generate our letters and then we put T letters into field letters. Now we don't have a field letters anymore, so we will delete that. And what we need is we need some code that will instead change the labels of our buttons to our letters. So we still generate our letters here. But after that, instead of putting it into a field, what we will do is we will repeat with x equals 1 to 7 because we always have 7 letters. We will set the label of button, and all our buttons are named letter and then a number. So letter 1, letter 2, letter 3, letter 4, letter 5, letter 6, letter 7. So we set the label of button letter 1 of group letters, and we'll set it to item X of T letters. So the label of button 1 will be set to item 1 of T letters, letter 2, letter 3, letter 4. So that will populate our buttons with the selected letters. Let's apply that, check there are no errors, and to test it we will go into run mode and we'll start a new game. So now we have 7 buttons with sorry, it keeps popping up. 7 letters, 7 buttons with our selected letters. So if we keep pressing new, then those will change. So actually what I'm going to do just quickly while I'm thinking about it is, as we saw before, buttons that are 3D, etc., they don't look great on mobile. So let's quickly update that while we're here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off select grouped, which will allow me to select individual controls that are part of a group. And then I'm going to multi-select all the buttons. Here, I'm going to open up the object inspector for them. So as you can see here, it says multiple objects. We're going to turn off 3D. We're going to leave show border on, but we're going to set it down to 1. And just to make them look a bit different, let's make them round rects. And let's make the font size a bit bigger. That's a bit small for the size of the buttons. Let's try 28. Okay, there we go. Looks a bit better now. Okay, so now we've got our buttons with the letters on. We need the user to be able to click on them to populate their answer. And this is where having grouped the buttons is going to be helpful. So what I want to do is I want to turn select grouped off again, so that when I'm in edit mode, I can select the group. So if you see when select grouped is on, so I can select grouped controls, then it will select a button. When it's off, it will select the group for me. And what we want to do is we want to add some code to this group. So we open up the object script and we're going to handle mouse up. On mouse up, what I want to do is I need to find the label of the button that was clicked. And so doing that, what I can do is I can use the target function. So what I can say is I can say put the label of the target into T letter. So because the buttons belong to the group, and because of the way the message path works, where a message that's not handled by a control will be passed to a group if it belongs to the group, or to the card, or to the stack, these buttons individually don't have a mouse up handler. So their mouse up message will be passed to the group, and we're handling it here. But because it could be any one of the 7 buttons that triggers this mouse up handler, what we do is we use the target, and that will give us the ID of the button that was actually clicked. So the target is the control where the message originated from. So we put the label of the target into T letter, and then we'll put T letter after field answer. So that will put it after whatever is already in there. And then what we can do is we can disable the target, because we don't want the buttons, or we don't want the letters at the moment to be used more than once. Later on, that might be something that we add to our game where you can use the letters multiple times. But at the moment, we just want them to be used once. So after the button has been clicked and the letter has been put after whatever is already in the answer field, then we'll disable the target, because then the user can't click on it again. So let's see if that works okay. Okay, so I'll just start a new game. So J, that might work as a word. So you can see that the letters went after the previous letters in the field. They're now disabled, so I can't click them again. Click enter, and that was a valid word. So we now have our word in the list. But you'll see here that those letters are now disabled. So what we need to do is, similarly to before where we cleared the answer field, we still want to clear the answer field, but we also want to reset the sort of enabled state of the buttons so that you can type in the next word. So we will do that using our card script. And we'll go to our check word. And what we do is, in here where we've checked if the word is valid and everything, when we get to the part where we're clearing the answer field, we also want to reset our buttons. So here we'll reset the button state. So they're the same letters, but we just want to reset their enabled state. So again, we will repeat with x equals 1 to 7. And we will set the disabled of button letter and X, I'm going to put that in brackets, of group letters to false. So when we want it to be disabled, we set the disabled to true, and here we set the disabled to false. There's also always the option of using the enabled state, which is the inverse. So we could set the enabled to true, or we can set the disabled to false. But because we used disabled before, I'll use disabled here. Okay, so let's start a new game, and that we see here that I started a new game, but they're still disabled. So actually, we should also put resetting the buttons into our new game handler. So we select and show our letters. We set the labels, as well as setting the label. In here, let's also set the disabled state. So we will also set the disabled of button letter X of group letters to false. After changing the label, we also update the disabled state. Let's test a new game. Oh, that didn't work.
I think there's something wrong with your code.
Oh, I see it. To false, not of false. And that was all. Oh, no, still something wrong. New game. Or is it all right? Let me see.
It says to item X to false, which I don't think is right.
Set the disabled of button letter and X of group letters to false. Yes, thank you, Heather. To false. Right. Third time lucky. Okay, it was okay there, but we also need to make that fix in check word. Oh no, it's okay there. Set the disabled of button letter X of group letters to false. So that was a copy and paste and not seeing the error. So thank you, Heather. Let's try it again now. New, there we get new letters, everything is enabled. Okay, so now we can type in a word, gem. That's not a valid word. Hex. So now the buttons are reset, the answer field is cleared again, and there is our word in the field. Okay, so now we've got some buttons to input the answer. So that'll work nicely on mobile because the user can just, tap the letters. But when you're on the desktop, it's not so nice. So what we want to do is to make it so that this design still works nicely on desktop. What we'll do is we'll allow the user to also use the keyboard. So to do that, what we do is we're still in our card script. If you've got it closed, you can open it from the object menu. And what we're going to do is we are going to handle the key down message. So, no, sorry, we'll do key up. So key up is a message that is sent when the user types a key. And it also passes the key that was pressed, P key. Whenever the user hits a key, then it tells you what. So if I press A, I'll get a key up message, and the parameter here will be A. So this will allow the user to type, and what we need to do is we need to check that the letter they have typed is one of our 7 letters, and then we need to sort of simulate what would happen if you had pressed the button. So we put the letter into the field and we disable the button so that it's not available anymore. So what we'll do is, again, we're going to repeat across each of our 7 letters. So I'll just copy this, although copying and pasting didn't work brilliant for me last time, but I'm sure it'll be fine this time. So we'll check each letter in turn to see if it is if the letter that was passed in P key is one of our 7 letters. We'll check if the button's still enabled because we don't want them to reuse the letters. And if it is one of the letters and it is enabled, then we'll put it into the field and then we'll disable the button. So the first thing we want to check is if it is one of our letters. So we say if the label of button, letter and X of group letters is P key, so if the letter that was typed is one of our letters, then we've passed the first test. Then if we check it is enabled, so we check if the disabled of button letter and X of group letters is false. So if it is one of the letters and if it is one of the letters and it's not currently disabled, then it's good. It's a valid letter. So at that point, what we want to do is we will put key after field answer, and then we will disable button letter X of letters. And what we can do there now, because we have found our valid letter, what we can do is we can then, if we want to, we can exit the repeat, because we know that it won't happen again. So in this case, we can just, even if we're only on letter 3, if we found the matching one, then we don't need to look at the rest of the letters. Okay, so this should allow the user to type in letters. So let's apply that. That's green, that's good. Let's come here, we'll start a new game. So hopefully I can type RUG. So you'll see that now rug is in the answer and the buttons have been disabled. And then click enter. It's a valid word, so that's good. So that worked nicely, but you'll notice that when I typed one of the letters, U, so that's lowercase because I wasn't holding down the shift key, but this is uppercase here. So if we just want it to look the same, what we can do here is when we're putting it into the field, we can uppercase it. Uppercase is a function. We pass, oh, it's not uppercase, that's not what it's called, sorry, it's called toUpper. We can call the toUpper function with the letter that was pressed, and that'll put the uppercase version after field answer. So it'll just look a bit more like the buttons that we're using here. Because if we click them, we get uppercase. So if we type them, we also want to get uppercase. I don't think that's going to be a word, but let's enter it anyway. Okay, so now when we put our letters in here, we get uppercase. And also if I type hug, it's now uppercase, even though I wasn't holding the shift key. Okay, so that's nice, and that lets our desktop users use their keyboard. Now, the other thing that might be quite nice on the desktop is to allow the user to use the return or the enter key to check their word instead of having to use their mouse. If they just type the word in, probably quite nice just to hit one of the keys. So similarly to key up, we also get a return key message when the return key is pressed, and we get an enter key message when the enter key is pressed. There's also backspace key. I don't think there's a spacebar key, but there's different key messages. So key up's a general one. There's command key, function key. So you can do all different things with the keyboard. And all we need to do in here is we need to call the check word command. It already does everything that we need. So we can just call it when the return key or the enter key is pressed. And that saves our desktop user from having to switch back to using the keyboard. So let's try one. Gut. Apparently I'm only able to do 3-letter words. So right now let me hit the keys. Oh, that did not work. So let me see what happened there. So what I'll do is I'll put a little breakpoint here and see if it's not getting hit. I did apply that, and our key up is working. So let's see why return key and enter key did not work. So these keys are working. These ones are not, and I am not sure why. So I've put a breakpoint on, but even the breakpoint is not getting hit. Ah, there we go. So that worked that time, and There we go. And I think that might have just been depending on what my, because I put the messages here are on the card. So there might be a case where the message is not reaching the card. It could be if it was looking at the fields. Let's have a look at this field. Shouldn't have been that one. Now this one does have traversal on, so let's try turning that off. So then our fields shouldn't receive the messages. And let's try another word. Pip, that's a word. There we go. So I think maybe it was just that the message was being trapped by the field there. But now our return key and enter key are working. So we've made all these changes. So let's also have a look at this on the simulator now before we go any further and see if it seems to be working nicely. Okay, so here are our letters. Let's see. Fox, that's the word. So we can type it in, hit enter, there we go. Yeah, so that's working quite nicely on mobile, and you can see that now we're not getting the keyboard popping up, which in some cases, like I say, that may be absolutely fine, but in other cases you may not want the keyboard. You might want to provide a different method of input, and this is quite nice if you're on a real phone just to tap the words in. It's probably actually a bit nicer than using your keyboard on the device. Okay, so that was the next part of our app. So we've got about 20 minutes left. So I've got some more stuff that we can do, but if anybody's got any questions, do just pop them into the chat just now so that we can have a look at them or have a chat about them before we move on. If not, then we will carry on with my idea for showing progress in a slightly different way. So the idea here is that we're going to use some stars, some star icons, use SVGs. And so we'll have a star for each possible letter. And instead of just having a progress field here, what we'll do is as the user finds the words, then we'll update the stars. So we get a bit more of a visual idea of our progress. So let's do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some space for my stars. I'm going to start by deleting my progress field because we won't need that. I'm actually also going to delete this label field just to give us a bit more space. And then I'll shrink this down a bit. And before I do anything else, let's open up our card script and replace the parts where we were referring to the progress field. So I think in new game, we currently... Do we do anything with progress in new game? Yes, we put empty into field progress, so let's delete that. And also when we check Word, I think we update the progress field. So let's delete this. I'll leave the comment in there because we'll still want to update our progress. We're just going to do it in a slightly different way. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the SVG widget here. So that's this control here in the widgets section of the property inspector. So we're going to drag on an SVG widget. Now the default one is the star, but instead of the star, we're going to use an outline of a star for the words that haven't been found, and then we're going to fill it in and make it a different color when it's been found. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this one, what am I going to call this one? It's going to be our template, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the template and we're going to make copies of it for each word. So we're just going to call this star template. And instead of using this filled star, we're going to use a different one. So what you do is you click here, and then you can actually search for the name or what you think the name might be. So here it's a star, but we're going to use the outline. And that's a bit big as well. So I think what we'll do is we will make that a bit smaller. So we'll make it 15 by 15, because there might be quite a lot, so we want to fit them on here. And then we're also going to set some colors. So we're going to, for the foreground color, we're going to make it a nice light gray. So we'll just pick a light gray here. And for the highlight color, we're going to make it gold, because that's the color we want it to be when it's been found. So that's our star template. And what we're going to do is we're going to group that. So we're going to create a group. At the moment, it's just got our star template, but later it'll have all our stars. And what we'll call the group is we will call the group words found stars, because it is going to show all the words that we found. So we'll call the group words found stars. And what we're going to do is we're going to we can stretch the group out a bit, even though it's only got that one star in it. What we can do is we can stretch it out. And then in the property inspector for the group here, we'll go to the size and position pane and we'll lock the lock. And I just realized that also here, let's turn on the border so that we can see where our group is. So we turn on the border and we'll turn off 3D. So now we can at least see where our group is, and we've got our star template in there. So what we need to do is we need to do two things. We need to set up our star display when we generate our new list of words, and we need to fill in our stars when we find words. So we're going to start with our code to generate the stars. So we're going to go to the object menu and open up the card script, and we'll be generating the stars, when we start a new game. So first we'll generate our letters, then we'll generate our words, and once we've generated our words, what we'll do is we'll set up our stars. We'll generate our stars. We need to do it after we've generated the words because we need to know how many stars to generate. So from here, we'll just call a handler generate stars. What we'll do is down at the bottom of our script, we will start our generate stars command. What we can do is we will be using our script local variable, our sword list, to generate our list of stars, because that's already been populated with the new list of stars. Okay, so what we need to do is the first thing we want to do is we want to delete any stars that are already in the group, but not our template star. We don't want to delete our template star. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock the screen, because we'll be making quite a lot of screen updates here, and we don't want the user to see flickering or stars appearing and disappearing. The generate stars, we want them just to appear generated all at once. We don't want them to show up one at a time or anything. So we'll lock the screen at the start, unlock the screen at the end. And what we'll do is we don't know how many stars are in our group at the moment from our previous game. So what we can do is we can repeat with x equals number of controls in group words found stars down to 1. So usually when we're repeating or iterating over a number, we'll start at 1 and move up. But in this case, we want to start at the number of controls and work down. And the reason for that is if we start with 1, so repeat with x equals 1 to the number of controls. If we then delete widget 1, then does widget 2 become widget 1? When we get to the last widget, it's not there anymore because they've all been deleted. So what we do is we start at the highest number and we work our way down. So then we're deleting 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're not going to get into a state where we're trying to delete a number that doesn't exist anymore because we've deleted the previous ones, if that makes sense. So we'll start at the top number and work our way down, but we don't want to delete our template. So we check the short name of the control. So we say if the short name of control X of group words found stars. I've picked a shorter name for that. Words found stars is not star template. Then we will delete, I'll just copy it here. We will then delete control X of group words found stars. And this will work okay because we know that the only controls that are in our group are our star SVGs. We know that there's no other controls in there. If you're doing this with a group that was more complex, that had more controls that you don't want to delete, maybe it's got some backgrounds, maybe it's got something else in there, then you would need to do some more checks on short names of controls, or you'd repeat for each button, or different ways to do it. But we know that we've only got our SVGs in there, so this should work fine. So this will delete any stars that are already in there from the previous game. Now next, we want to generate our new stars, and we're going to lay them out in rows across here. So we end up with rows of stars. So to do that, what we'll be doing is we'll be copying the template and then we'll be repositioning it. So we need to know what position each of our copies of our template, what they're going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in the top left of the group. So we're going to start up here, and then we'll go across, and then we'll start a new row when we need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the top of group words find stars into T-top. And then we'll also do the same for the left, and then we'll use these values to position the copies of our template. Okay, and now we need to create one for each of the words in our list. So we repeat with x equals 1 number of lines in S word list. So that is our local variable that is created when we start a new game. So when we generate the words, then we end up with a list of words, and we're going to use that to know how many stars to create. So we create one for each one, and what we want to do, so we copy widget star template of group. Thought I still had just words find stars in there. So we copy widget star template of group words find stars, and we copy it to that group because we want the copies to be in the group. We don't want them to end up just out of the group and on the card. So we're copying widget star template of group words find stars to group words find stars. So that will create a copy for each of our words. We're then going to set the visible, we're going to set the name of it first. We'll set the name of it, and it is that special variable here. I think we've discussed it before, but if we're doing something like copying a widget, then we can set the name of it, and it will refer to that widget that we have just created. So we set the name of it to, and we'll call it star, and then X for the sort of number of the word that we're on. So word 1, word 2, word 3. We'll have star 1, star 2, star 3. And we'll set the visible of it to true. And that's because we're going to make our template invisible. So we'll set the visible of it to true. And then we'll set the top left of it to T left, T top. So actually here, what I'm going to do, just to space things out a little bit, is we'll start this 3 pixels along and 3 pixels in, so it's not right up at the very top left, it's inset a little bit. So we've got our top left values. So we set the top left of the current one to T left, T top. So now what we need to do is we need to update T left and T top ready for the next control that we're going to create. And because I worked it out earlier, I know that we can fit 16 stars across here. So whenever we get to, the 16th star, the 32nd star, etc., we need to start a new row. If we're not at the 16th or the 32nd or whichever star we're at, then we will stay on the same row. So we just have to update the left. And the way that we work that out is we say if X, so this is the the number of the word or star that we're on. If x mod 16 is 0, then, so if it's a multiple of 16, we know it's the last star in the row, the last one that will fit. Otherwise, then we're just staying on the same row. So if it is mod 16, if it's on the last star, then we need to start a new row. So what we do is we add height of it still being the control that we just created. So we had the height of it to t-top. And also we'll have that extra 3 pixels in there, so we get a little gap between our rows. So we add the height of it plus 3 to t-top, and then we put the left of group. Found word stars, and again plus 3 into t left. So when we're starting a new row, we're updating t-top to the next row, and then we're starting over on the left again. So we're using the left of the group. So we're moving back. When we're just staying on the same row, all we have to do is add the width of it plus 3 to t left. So every 16 stars, we move on to a new row. Otherwise, we stay on the same row and we just keep updating the left of where the next star is going to be, if that makes sense. So there we go. So that will create all our stars. And then when we're done, what we'll do is we'll set the formatted height of group words find stars. Sorry, we're going to set the height of group words find stars to the formatted height of group find stars. That will just make that'll ensure that the group is as tall as it needs to be to show all the stars that we have just created. So let's apply that. And hopefully, oh, there's one more thing that we need to do. So I'll go back into edit mode. We need to make our template invisible because otherwise it'll show in the group and we don't want it to. So there's 2 ways we can do it. We can turn off select grouped, so we can just select the star. Or just to show you something else, what we can do is if we've got select grouped on, we've selected the group, we can go into edit group. Now it just shows the controls that are part of the group. Select the star, open up the object inspector, turn its visible off, and then go into run mode. That will bring us back to seeing everything. We're in run mode, so hopefully now when we click on new, we'll get a set of stars that represent all the words that we could find. Okay, so apparently that set of letters only has 1 word. Let's check it against all words. No, there is definitely more than 1 word there. So there's something not quite right here. So what is not right? So probably something maybe in the layout of the stars. So let's have a look at the project browser. So we're on the game card. There's our word find stars. And there's only star 1 there. I think I might know what the issue is. Let's just put a breakpoint on here. And let's start another new game. So I'm repeating with x equals 1 to the number of lines in S word list, but maybe our word list is comma separated. It is, so what I should have done is I should have used items instead of lines there. So hopefully now if I start another new game, make sure I'm in run mode. There, that looks better. So now we have a star for each word. And because our height of our group words find stars can now be variable, so it will depend on how many stars there are, how tall it is. In this case, everything still fits, but we might have more stars than that, in which case our found words field might not fit. So what we will do is we will go to our new game handler where we call generate stars. And after that, what we will do is we will update the size and position of that field. So what we will do is after we've generated our stars, what we will do is we want it to be as tall as it will fit in this space, and we want it to sit under this words find stars group. So after we've done this, what we will do is we will put the bottom of group words found stars entity top. And then we'll set the height of field found words to. We need to work out what the height will be. So we've got the height of the stack. So that's as much space as there is on the whole stack. And what we'll do is we'll subtract that value that we just calculated, so that T top, because we know, so the bottom of this group will give us the amount of space that's used by everything up to there. And then we also need to leave some space for these buttons here, so we'll also subtract 50. That's the height of the stack minus the space for all this, minus the space for these. That should give us a decent height for our field, and then we'll reset the top of it. So we then set the top of field found words to T top, and we want to leave a bit of space, so we'll add 10 there. So we're just calculating how tall it can be, and then we're putting it in the right place. Go into run mode, we'll click new. And there should be the height of this stack. And there you can see it's now using up all the space, however many stars there are. It will automatically resize to fill this space. Now we're just about out of time. We didn't quite get to filling in the stars when we find a word, but we can do that first thing in our next session. So we will pick that up. We'll pick that up from here, and we will carry on. There's not that much left to do, really, just filling in the stars, and then maybe giving it a test, and maybe setting some colours on these borders and things to make it look a bit prettier. But we can maybe spend the first 10 minutes of the next session finishing that off. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen for now and come back to Heather.
Well, that was all very interesting. I have to say, though, when the stars appeared, it just looks like magic to me.
Well, that's the point. magic stars.
Yeah. Well, I was carefully trying to follow all that code, but I got a little bit lost. But I'm sure on watching it back, it would all become clear.
On watching back or looking at the slides, which will be provided as well.
Yep. And don't forget, they will all appear in your LiveCode accounts within a couple of days, so you can download all the materials and have a play and see how you get on.
And I think I'll include the sort of the completed stack of where we would have got to today in the materials, but we will maybe spend the first little bit of the next session just going over it. But you'll get all the slides and all the code and the finished stack in these materials anyway.
Okay, and don't forget, tomorrow we have the advanced session, and Michael McCreary is going to be going over using REST APIs with you, and I'm sure a lot of you will be interested in that, so don't forget. We'll be looking forward to seeing you.
And thanks for coming along today, everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice afternoon, evening, wherever you are. It's evening for us now, isn't it, Heather?
It is. It is.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Okay. Bye.